The termination letter was printed on company letterhead, crisp white paper with the NextScore Solutions logo centered at the top in dark blue ink. Daniel Hayes had read it 3 times already, standing on the front steps of the building, and each time the words rearranged themselves into something that still didn't feel real. Effective immediately. Gross negligence. Unauthorized system access. Damages estimated at $2.3 million. The wind off Lake Michigan came in hard and sideways. The kind of February cold that didn't just chill you, it got into your joints, into the space behind your eyes, and stayed there. Flakes of snow swirled around the entrance of the NextScore tower, catching in the amber glow of the security lights before disappearing into the dark. Daniel stood without moving, one hand holding the letter, the other hanging loose at his side. The building behind him was all glass, 31 floors of it, lit from inside, warm-looking in a way that now had nothing to do with him. He had walked through those doors for 4 years. He had known which elevator was slowest and which coffee maker on the 6th floor had the strongest output and which chairs in the corner conference room had wheels that stuck. He had known the name of the night security guard on Tuesdays and the birthday of the woman in accounts receivable who baked for the whole floor every year in April. He had known all the texture of this place, the accumulated small knowledge of someone who had been present and paying attention. None of that was in the letter either. Some of them pretended not to notice him. Others didn't bother pretending. Marcus from the 2nd floor watched openly, arms folded across his chest. Diane from the help desk turned away as soon as their eyes met. Nobody came outside. Nobody said anything to him. The glass doors had already locked. His badge no longer worked. "Daddy." He turned. Emma stood at the base of the steps, her small backpack hanging off one shoulder, her winter coat, the pale blue one with the broken zipper that he kept meaning to get fixed, pulled as tight as she could manage with her own hands. She was 6 years old, and she had her mother's eyes, that clear, searching gray that could make you feel like you were being quietly understood from the inside out. She was looking up at him with those eyes now. "Are we going home?" Daniel Hayes was 34 years old. He had worked at NextScore Solutions for 4 years, 3 months, and 11 days. He had stayed late more times than he could count. He had covered for colleagues when they called in sick, debugged systems over weekends, and accepted less than his market rate because the company offered decent benefits and flexible start times that made it possible for him to get Emma to school and still be at his desk before 8. He had never, not once, accessed the company's primary network architecture outside of his designated workstation or his assigned user privileges. He had never touched the partition that controlled the payment processing servers. He had never had a reason to. None of that was in the letter. "Yeah, baby," he said. "We're going home." He came down the steps slowly and crouched in front of her, adjusting the collar of her coat and zipping the upper half of the broken zipper as far as it would go. The cold made his fingers clumsy. Emma watched him work with patient, serious eyes. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "We're going home," he said again. He stood, took her hand, and started walking toward the parking structure. The snow was coming down harder now. The city beyond the glass towers was a soft gray blur, the traffic on Michigan Avenue moving slowly through the slush. He could feel the stares from inside the building on the back of his neck even after he had turned away, even after the glass and the distance and the snow had swallowed up the space between him and the people who had decided, without much deliberation, that he was the easiest explanation. The truth was simple and inconvenient. That afternoon, the NextScore Solutions primary server cluster had crashed. Not a minor outage, a catastrophic, cascading failure that had taken down payment processing, client-facing portals, internal communications, and the company's primary data pipeline. Recovery was still ongoing. Engineers estimated 48 hours minimum. The financial exposure was significant. Someone had to have caused it. The last technician logged into the server administration panel before the crash was, according to the access logs, Daniel Hayes. That was the beginning and the end of the investigation, as far as the IT director and the HR team were concerned. They had a name, a timestamp, and a disaster. The meeting had lasted 11 minutes. Daniel had tried to explain that he hadn't been at his workstation during that window, that he had been in the far corner of the open office, away from any terminal, helping Emma set up the folding table he'd brought in because the schools had closed for the storm, and he'd had no backup care option. He'd emailed his supervisor about it in the morning. He had the email. Nobody read the email. They had a name, a timestamp, and a disaster. Now Daniel walked through the parking structure with his daughter's hand in his. The termination letter folded into quarters in his coat pocket, and something heavy and formless settling into the space in his chest where certainty used to live. He had his car. He had $847 in checking. He had a lease on a 2-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Square, and a daughter who had no idea what had just happened, and a list of monthly expenses that did not pause for termination letters or February storms. He was reaching for his keys when he heard footsteps behind him, fast, deliberate, echoing off the concrete, and then a voice he didn't recognize. Mr. Hayes. He turned. She was already 10 feet away when he turned, walking with the kind of economy of motion that suggested she had spent considerable time being watched and had long since stopped performing anything for an audience. Victoria Ashford was 36. She ran NextScore Solutions, not as a figurehead, not as a symbolic appointment, but in the operational, decision-making, gets in at 7 leaves at 9 sense of the word. She had inherited a company that was losing money and spent 4 years making it one of the top, mid-sized financial data services firms in the Midwest. She wore a charcoal wool coat, no scarf, her dark hair pulled back simply. She was holding a piece of paper in one hand. Daniel recognized it immediately. The wind in the parking structure must have caught it when he was walking out. It was a copy of his termination letter, or rather, it was the cover sheet from the HR packet, which must have slipped free without him noticing. Victoria held it out to him. "I believe this is yours," she said. She paused. "I'm Victoria Ashford." "I know who you are," Daniel said. "Then you also know I wasn't in the building this morning when the decision was made." She looked at the letter once, then back at him. Her expression was even. Impossible to read from the outside. "I just landed. I've been reviewing the incident summary in the car for the last 20 minutes. There are several things that don't add up." Daniel's jaw tightened. The decision's already been made. Decisions can be unmade. She glanced down at Emma, who was watching her with open curiosity and no particular fear, as children sometimes are with strangers who do not talk down to them. "My office is warm. I have a couch in the sitting area that's comfortable, and I'm fairly certain my assistant keeps a box of colored pencils in her desk." She met Daniel's eyes again. 10 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Emma looked up at her father. Daniel thought about the $847 in checking. He thought about the lease. He thought about the fact that if he drove away now, the only thing waiting for him was the particular silence of an apartment in the middle of the afternoon on a Wednesday, when he was supposed to be at work, and the work of figuring out how to explain to Emma, gradually, over the next few days, why their routine was about to change in ways he hadn't yet calculated. He thought about the look in the IT director's eyes during that 11-minute meeting. The way the man had already moved on before Daniel had finished his second sentence. 10 minutes, he said. Victoria Ashford's office occupied a corner of the 31st floor. One wall of glass faced north toward the lake. The other faced west over the city grid. The sky outside was the color of old pewter, the snow blowing horizontally now across the upper floors. Inside it was warm and quiet, the kind of deliberate quiet that costs something to maintain in a building this size. The sitting area held a long, low couch in a deep charcoal fabric, a glass coffee table, and 2 armchairs. Victoria's assistant, a young woman named Stephanie who wore her auburn hair in a practical ponytail and moved with the focused efficiency of someone who had made a conscious decision to be very good at her job, appeared in the doorway within 30 seconds of them arriving, and silently placed a box of assorted colored pencils and a legal pad on the coffee table in front of Emma without being asked to. Emma sat down and began immediately. Victoria poured herself a glass of water from the sideboard and offered Daniel one. He shook his head. "Walk me through your afternoon," she said. She sat in one of the armchairs, crossed one leg over the other, and looked at him with the kind of focused attention that felt, in his current state, almost clinical. He talked. He kept it factual, chronological, the way he had in the HR meeting, trying to lead with information rather than emotion. He described the email he'd sent to his supervisor at 7:48 that morning, explaining that Emma's school had closed due to the storm and asking if it would be permissible to bring her in. He described setting up the folding table in the far left corner of the open workspace, away from the active terminals, the area near the windows that people generally avoided because the heating duct above it was loud. He described the work he'd been doing on his assigned ticket queue. Routine maintenance updates, nothing touching the payment architecture, nothing requiring elevated system privileges. He described the moment at 2:17 the afternoon, when the screens throughout the office had gone dark. He described the way Lucas Grant had looked at him in the moments after that, before the scramble to assess the damage had fully begun. A single, brief look. Not accusatory. Something quieter than accusation, more like confirmation, as if something had arrived that he had been expecting. Daniel stopped talking. Victoria had not interrupted him once. She had not written anything down or checked her phone or shifted in her chair. She had simply listened. "You said 7:48, she said. "Do you still have that email on your phone? And the folding table, was it one of the companies or did you bring it yourself?" "I brought it. It's in my car. I was going to take it home tonight." He paused. "Today." Victoria stood. "I want to show you something." She moved to her desk and turned the large monitor to face him, pulling up what appeared to be a segment of the server access log. She pointed to a timestamp and a user credential string. "This is the log entry that placed you in the server administration panel at 2:09 p.m., 8 minutes before the crash." She looked at him steadily. "Your workstation is on the east side of the floor. The folding table area near the window is on the west side. The distance between them is approximately 40 feet, with 8 rows of desks between them." She turned back to the monitor. "The badge entry records show you badged into the floor at 8:04 a.m. and did not badge out until after the incident at 2:17. "I didn't leave the floor," he confirmed. "No. But someone else did and came back." She looked at him again, and something in her expression had shifted, though he couldn't precisely name what. "I'm not done, but I want you to stay." From the couch, Emma looked up from her drawing. "Miss Ashford," she said seriously, "do you have orange?" "I need orange for the cat's fur." Victoria looked at her. Something passed across her face, a flicker of something unguarded, before she recovered her composure. "Check the blue box," she said. "I believe there's a burnt orange near the bottom." Emma dug through the pencils with the focused energy of a person with an important task to complete. Victoria looked back at Daniel. "Tell me about the drawing," she said quietly. It was not the kind of evidence that would appear in a legal filing. Before Victoria asked about the drawing, she had asked about the day itself, the whole day. From the beginning, Daniel had talked with the careful, unadorned honesty of someone who had long since stopped performing his own story for other people's benefit. He had married Claire at 26 in a small ceremony in her parents' backyard in Evanston, the two of them standing in the particular dappled light of early September, while Claire's younger sister played guitar badly and everyone laughed. Claire had been a middle school art teacher. She had the quality of noticing things the way light came through a specific window at a specific hour, the way a child's face changed when something clicked into understanding. She had been healthy until she wasn't, and then she had been sick with an efficiency that outpaced everyone's ability to prepare for it. And then she had been gone. Emma was 2 years old. Daniel had navigated the subsequent years with the specific competence of someone who has no alternative. He had found systems. He had found routines. He had calibrated his professional ambition to the realistic constraints of solo parenthood with a precision that occasionally looked, from the outside, like a lack of ambition, but was actually something more honest than ambition. It was a clear-eyed accounting of what he had to offer and what it cost. He got Emma to school. He got himself to work. He debugged systems during his lunch break so he could leave by 5:30. He learned to cook 7 meals that Emma would reliably eat. He kept the apartment clean enough that it didn't feel like surrender. He made sure that when Emma needed him to be present, he was actually present, not there in body while his mind was somewhere else classifying technical debt. He was not extraordinary. He was steady, which is a different thing, and in some circumstances a more useful one. Victoria had listened to this without interruption, and without the particular expression that people sometimes wore when they were deciding how much sympathy was appropriate. She had simply absorbed the information and, he suspected, categorized it with the same methodical efficiency she applied to everything else. The morning of the 11th, she said, when he finished. The school closed at 11 p.m. the night before. Storm advisory. I emailed my supervisor first thing, and he said, fine. One word. Daniel paused, which I took as approval. Emma Hayes, age 6, had spent the afternoon of February 11th drawing at a folding table near the west windows of the NextCore Solutions open workspace, while her father worked at a terminal 2 feet away from her, not the terminal assigned to his permanent workstation, but the nearest available monitor, which he'd used with permission to access his ticket queue remotely. The drawing she had been working on since that afternoon was now 3/4 finished on the legal pad, rendered in colored pencil. A large orange cat sitting in a window while snow fell outside. In the upper left corner, Emma had written in the careful, slightly oversized print of a child who had recently learned to do this the time. 2:15. She could not have said why she wrote the time. She had seen her father write times on things and she liked doing what her father did. 2:15 p.m. 2 minutes before the crash. 8 minutes after the log entry that had placed Daniel in the server administration panel on the east side of the floor. Victoria held the legal pad in both hands and looked at it for a long time. The cat was very orange. The snow in the drawing was careful and deliberate, each flake a slightly different shape. Daniel Hayes's daughter had her mother's eyes, the gray, understanding kind, and had apparently inherited her father's precision. She writes the time on her drawings? Victoria asked. She started doing it about 3 months ago, Daniel said. She saw me write timestamps in my work notes. She thought it was what you did. His voice was quiet. I never corrected her. Victoria set the legal pad down. She looked at the drawing once more, then at the little girl who had made it, who was now constructing what appeared to be a secondary cat in the lower right corner with the burnt orange pencil she'd found. Mr. Hayes, Victoria said, I need to make a few phone calls. Stephanie will bring you both something to eat. I'd ask you not to leave the building yet. Are you? He stopped. He looked at her carefully, as if weighing whether the question was worth asking. Do you believe me? Victoria picked up her phone. I believe that the log entry says you were in one place, she said, and that your daughter drew a picture that says you were in another. She met his eyes. I intend to find out which one is wrong. She paused, and I already have a working theory. The NextCore IT department maintained 4 overlapping security systems: server access logs tied to individual user credentials, physical badge readers at each floor entry and exit point, security cameras covering the elevator banks and corridor intersections, and workstation activity monitors that logged keystrokes and login events by machine serial number. They had checked one of these systems, Victoria Ashford, working with the company's head of security, a methodical man named Gerald Pratt, who had been with the firm for 11 years and had the manner of someone who took procedural correctness as a point of personal honor. Spent 45 minutes cross-referencing all 4. The results were not ambiguous. Daniel Hayes's user credentials had been used to access the server administration panel at 2:09 p.m. from Workstation Terminal 7E14, located on the east side of the 7th floor. His badge logs showed no movement away from the open office floor between 8:04 a.m. and 2:17 p.m. The security camera covering the corridor to the east side workstation area showed no footage of Daniel Hayes passing through it at any point during the afternoon. Workstation 7E14 was not his assigned terminal. The machine's activity log showed it had been unlocked at 2:06 p.m. using a proximity card, not a password, and returned to locked status at 2:11 p.m. The proximity card system used by NextCore was designed so that employees could temporarily unlock nearby machines for quick access without logging out the primary user, provided they had the right clearance level. Someone with senior IT access clearance had unlocked Daniel's session remotely on a machine 30 feet away from him and used it to execute commands in the server administration panel. Gerald Pratt sat back in his chair. "This was deliberate," he said, not as a dramatic announcement but as a simple statement of professional conclusion. "Yes," Victoria said. "Who has this clearance level?" Gerald pulled the list. It was short. Lucas Grant's name was near the top. Victoria looked at the name for a moment. Then she looked at the camera footage Gerald had pulled up, showing the east corridor at 2:06 p.m., a figure moving quickly, head angled slightly down, pausing at Terminal 7E14 for approximately 4 minutes before moving away. The figure was Lucas Grant. "Pull everything," Victoria said. "Emails, badge records, the full camera archive from the last 2 weeks. I want to understand the shape of this before I walk into that room with him." Gerald nodded. "I'll have it within the hour." Victoria stood. "Make it 45 minutes. Lucas Grant had joined NextCore Solutions 14 months ago with a strong resume, a confident interview performance, and a quality that some people in the office described as ambition and others, less charitably, described as a particular sensitivity to being outperformed. He was 31. He had a technical background that was genuinely solid. He understood systems architecture at a level that made him useful in complex debugging scenarios. But his work at NextCore had been, in the aggregate, uneven. He had delivered well on 2 high-profile projects and struggled significantly on a third, which had required Daniel to step in during the final week before deadline and rebuild a data routing process from scratch. Daniel had done this without complaint, without credit-seeking, and without ever mentioning it to management. He had simply fixed the problem and moved on. Lucas had known, and he had stored that knowledge somewhere it was not healthy to store things. 4 months ago, a team lead position had opened in the infrastructure group. Both Lucas and Daniel had been considered. The decision had taken 3 weeks longer than usual because, by most measurable criteria, Daniel was the stronger candidate, better evaluations, cleaner project history, twice the direct recommendations from colleagues. But Lucas had campaigned actively, had several private conversations with the IT director, and had, it emerged from the email archive Gerald Pratt pulled up, developed a working relationship with the director that had less to do with merit and more to do with the social architecture of the office. In the end, the position had been given to an external hire, which meant neither man had gotten it. But the process had made something explicit that had previously only been felt. Lucas had expected to win. He had not won. Daniel had been the reason not by doing anything, but simply by being the comparison that made the gap visible. Gerald Pratt laid the email archive on the desk in front of Victoria. There are 11 emails between Grant and the IT director over the past 6 weeks. Several of them discuss system vulnerabilities in ways that are, he paused, choosing his word, curious, meaning someone was developing a theory about how an outage could occur, and the conversation has a quality of prepositioning. He tapped one printout. This one, sent 9 days ago, contains a paragraph about weak points in the credential remote access protocol and scenarios where an unattended session could be exploited. It's framed as a security concern. He looked at her evenly, but no formal security report was ever filed. Victoria read the email twice. "He was writing his own explanation in advance," she said. "That's my assessment." She set the papers down and was quiet for a moment, staring at nothing in particular, running the logic through its full course. A man had calculated that if the right system failed at the right moment, and if another man's credentials were attached to the failure, the aftermath would do his work for him. He had understood that institutions under pressure look for the quickest, credible explanation, not the truest one. He had understood that a single father who had brought his child to work on a snow day would have a harder time being believed than a clean access log. He had understood all of this, and he had acted on it. Victoria thought about what it took to plan something like this, not the technical execution, which was sophisticated but not extraordinary, but the internal permission. The moment when a person's resentment became sufficiently calcified that they stopped evaluating the ethics and started evaluating only the feasibility. She had seen this architecture before, in other contexts, in other institutions. It required a particular kind of self-narrative. The story that the person being targeted had, through their own excellence, done something wrong to you. That their competence was itself a form of aggression. That correcting the imbalance was therefore not cruelty, but a form of justice. It was a story that was easier to maintain when your target was someone already vulnerable. A single father on a storm day with a child in the corner and a borrowed workstation and a supervisor who communicated in single-word emails. Gerald Pratt looked at her steadily. "How do you want to handle the IT director?" "Separately," Victoria said. "He didn't plan this, but he moved too fast and he didn't ask the right questions, and that's a conversation we'll have." She stood, straightening the folder in front of her. "One thing at a time. Schedule the meeting for 4 p.m., Victoria said. "Conference room B. Just the three of us and Gerald." Lucas Grant came into conference room B at 3:59 p.m. with the composed, slightly guarded expression of a man who had been prepared for several different versions of this conversation and had decided that calm confidence was the correct register for all of them. He was dressed well gray slacks, a dark blue button-down, no jacket. He had the look of someone who had spent the afternoon reconstructing his composure after a successful morning, which was close enough to accurate that it almost read as normalcy. But Victoria had spent 4 years reading rooms, and she caught the small tells. The fraction of a second's hesitation at the door. The way his eyes moved to Gerald Pratt before landing on her, the particular quality of his stillness when he sat, which was the stillness of someone consciously managing their stillness rather than simply being still. Victoria was already seated. Gerald Pratt sat to her left with a manila folder in front of him. There was a chair across the table with a glass of water on it, which Lucas took as an invitation. He sat down and looked at Victoria with an expression calibrated to suggest cooperative professionalism. "Miss Ashford, I understand you wanted to follow up on the Hayes situation. I'm happy to answer any questions." "I'm sure you are," Victoria said. Her voice was level, unhurried. "Let's start with Workstation 7, E14. The composure didn't crack. It adjusted a nearly imperceptible tightening, the kind of internal recalibration that most people would have missed. I'm not sure which terminal that is. East side, row 7. It's the machine your proximity card unlocked at 2:06 p.m. this afternoon." Victoria slid the badge access report across the table. "You can see your credential ID in the 4th column." Lucas looked at the document. "I was checking a ticket that had been opened for that area. It's normal for senior staff to access terminals remotely. 2. The ticket log doesn't show any open tickets for that terminal today," Gerald said, without looking up from his folder. "Or, for the past 2 weeks, I may have been looking at an adjacent machine." Victoria slid the camera still across the table. It was a clean image, timestamp visible in the corner, showing Lucas standing at Terminal 7E14. Lucas looked at it. "The thing I find most interesting," Victoria said, "is not the access log or the camera. Those are facts, and facts can sometimes be explained." She opened a folder in front of her. "What I find interesting is an email you sent to the IT director 9 days ago about credential remote access protocols. Specifically, the part where you describe, in fairly precise technical detail, exactly the method that was used to redirect Daniel Hayes' session to that terminal this afternoon." The silence in the room had a different quality now. "You were writing your cover story before you needed it," Victoria said. "Which tells me this wasn't impulsive. You thought about it. You planned it." She folded her hands on the table. "And you planned it because you understood that when an outage of this scale happens, people don't look carefully. They look quickly, and you wanted to make sure that when they looked quickly, they found Daniel Hayes. Lucas's jaw was tight. "I want to speak to. You don't get a counter-negotiation, Mr. Grant." Victoria's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. You took a careful, methodical approach to destroying a man's career. You used his own credentials against him. You chose a day when he was already vulnerable, when he'd brought his child to work, when his situation was slightly unusual, when he was the kind of person who might be disbelieved. You banked on this institution's tendency to move fast and look for the easiest answer. She paused. "You were right about the institution. You were wrong about today." Lucas looked at the table. "You didn't just crash a system," Victoria said. "You tried to take apart a person's life, his income, his ability to care for his daughter, his professional reputation." She let that sit. "That's not a technical infraction. That's something considerably worse." Gerald Pratt placed a second document on the table. "Your resignation, with the terms outlined, or we proceed through the formal review process and involve outside counsel. Your choice. You have until close of business today." Lucas Grant looked at the resignation document for a long time. Then he picked up the pen. Victoria sent the company-wide communication at 5:47 p.m. She had written 3 drafts. The first was precise and institutional, the kind of carefully phrased memo that corrected the record while minimizing the emotional weight of what had occurred. The second was angrier than was appropriate. The third was what she sent. It stated, plainly, that the investigation into the afternoon's server failure had been completed. It stated that the failure had resulted from a deliberate act of sabotage by a NextCore employee whose credentials and identity were confirmed across 4 independent security systems. It stated that the employee in question had resigned and that the matter would be subject to further legal review. It stated that the termination issued to Daniel Hayes earlier that day had been rescinded in full, effective immediately, and that the characterization of his conduct in that document was incorrect and would be expunged from his personnel file. It did not perform regret. It stated the facts, but at the end, in a section that her legal advisor had told her was unnecessary, Victoria had added a single paragraph. Daniel Hayes acted with integrity throughout his time at this company. He was failed today by a process that moved quickly when it should have moved carefully. I take responsibility for the systems that allowed that to happen. His reinstatement is not a gesture. It is a correction. The response to the email was immediate and, within the particular ecosystem of a corporate office, significant. Phones began buzzing throughout the floor. The people who had watched Daniel walk out through the glass front doors and said nothing to him began to understand, individually and at different speeds, what that silence had cost them in a precise moral accounting. Marcus, from the second floor, who had watched with folded arms, sent a message to a colleague that read only, "We got it wrong." He did not send it to Daniel. There was, for the moment, nothing adequate to send to Daniel. Diane, from the help desk, who had turned away, stood at the window of the third-floor break room for a long time, watching the snow come down, and felt the specific quality of shame that arrives not when you've done something terrible, but when you've done something small. She had not done anything to Daniel Hayes. She had simply done nothing for him, which in the circumstances amounted to the same thing. She had seen his face when he passed her desk with the termination letter in his hand, and she had looked away because it was easier, because the story the IT director had circulated was clean, and she had chosen to accept clean stories over complicated ones. It was a habit she had, and standing at the break room window in the snowlight, she resolved, with the particular sincerity that only arrives in private, to examine it. The IT director sat alone in his office for a long time. Victoria's calendar showed a meeting with him at 8 a.m. the following morning. He had accepted the invitation without reply. In the 31st floor office, Emma Hayes had fallen asleep on the charcoal couch, with a colored pencil still loosely held in one hand, and 4 completed drawings arranged carefully on the coffee table in front of her. Her orange cat, her snow scene, a drawing of what was clearly intended to be a large building, and a drawing of two figures, one tall, one small, holding hands in what appeared to be falling snow. Daniel sat in the armchair across from her and watched her sleep, and did not move when Stephanie came in quietly to place a blanket over her. Victoria came back into the sitting area at 6:15 p.m. She moved quietly, clocking the sleeping child immediately and adjusting her entry accordingly. Softer steps, door eased rather than latched. She stood by the window for a moment, looking out at the city. The snow had not stopped, but it had changed character, moving from the sharp horizontal bluster of the afternoon into something slower and more deliberate, flakes falling in steady vertical lines through the lit circles of the streetlights below. Daniel stood. "She's fine where she is," Victoria said quietly. He settled back. Victoria took the other armchair and was silent for a moment in a way that didn't feel like uncertainty, more like she was choosing the right entry point with the same precision she brought to most things. "The IT director's role is changing," she said. "I've been intending to restructure the infrastructure team for a quarter. The team lead position that was filled externally 6 months ago didn't work out. The person we hired left in December." Daniel looked at her. "I'm not offering you a consolation," she said. "I want to be clear about that. The team lead role requires someone with a specific combination of technical depth and judgment. The judgment part is not something you can train or credential. It's something you either have or you don't." She paused. "The events of today were not a test, but they did confirm something about your judgment that I would have wanted to know anyway." "What's that?" "That you don't catastrophize. That when you're under pressure, real pressure, not the performed kind, you stay inside the facts." She looked at him calmly. "That's rarer than people think." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Through the window, the city spread south and west in a grid of lights softened by snow. From where he sat, he could see the loop of the elevated train tracks, and beyond them the clustered towers of the financial district, and further out the neighborhoods where Chicago became less glossy and more itself. "I need to think about it," he said. "That's the correct answer. It doesn't mean no." "I know." Emma shifted on the couch. Her hand relaxed, and the colored pencil rolled off the cushion and hit the carpet without a sound. Neither adult moved to pick it up. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel said. "You can." The last part of the email. The paragraph at the end. He met her eyes. "You didn't have to put that in." Victoria considered this. "No," she said. "I didn't. Why did you?" She was quiet for several seconds. In the room, the heating system made a low, steady sound. Emma's breathing was slow and even. Outside, the snow fell in straight lines through the lamplight. "Because the record should be accurate," Victoria said. "All of it." She stood, signaled to Stephanie through the glass partition that the car should be brought around, and picked up her coat from the chair where she'd draped it hours earlier. She paused at the edge of the sitting area. "Take tomorrow," she said. "Come in Thursday if you want to continue the conversation." If not, she left it unfinished in a way that meant the door would remain open regardless. Daniel nodded. She walked out. He sat for a while longer in the warm quiet of the 31st floor, with his daughter sleeping 10 feet away and the city spread out below in the snow, and let the day finish happening to him. Emma woke at 6:43 with the disoriented serenity of a child who has slept well in an unexpected place. She sat up, looked around the unfamiliar room without alarm, located her colored pencils, and then looked at her father. "Did something good happen?" she asked. Daniel crossed the room and sat beside her on the couch. "Is the lady still here?" "No." She had to go. Emma considered this. She looked at her 4 drawings arranged on the coffee table, made a small sound of satisfaction, and began gathering the pencils back into their box. "She was nice," she said. "She knew where the orange was." She did. Emma looked at him again with her gray, searching eyes. "Are we still going home?" "Okay." She slid off the couch and put her backpack on, both straps this time, the way she did when she was ready in earnest. "Can we have soup?" "We can have soup." They took the elevator down alone. The lobby was quiet. The security guard at the front desk glanced up as they passed and said good night, in a tone that was slightly more deliberate than routine, and Daniel nodded back. Outside, the cold met them immediately. But it was a calmer cold than the afternoons the wind had dropped and the snow was falling in the slow, vertical way it sometimes did at night, flakes large and separate and unhurried. The parking structure had fewer cars now. Their footsteps on the concrete echoed in the particular way of large, empty spaces. Emma was quiet while Daniel unlocked the car, but in the way she was quiet when she was thinking rather than when she was tired. He was buckling her into the back seat when she spoke. "Daddy." "Yeah." "The lady, Miss Ashford." "Yeah." Emma looked at her drawings, which she was holding in a careful stack on her lap. She slid the top one off the orange cat in the window with the snow and the 215 written in the corner and held it out to him. "I want to give her this one." He looked at it. "She's already gone, Bug. I know." She kept holding it out, insistent in the quiet, unhurried way she had. "For tomorrow. Or Thursday. Whenever." Daniel took the drawing and held it carefully. He looked at it. The very orange cat, the deliberate snowflakes, the timestamp written in a 6-year-old's careful print. The small, unconscious act of record-keeping that had, in the end, been more precise and more honest than any official document produced that day. "Okay," he said. "We'll bring it Thursday." He closed her door gently and walked around to the driver's side. Through the windshield, he could see the Nexcore tower rising above the parking structure, its upper floors lit against the dark sky, snow falling past the glass in slow white lines. He thought about the team lead role, about the specific combination of technical depth and judgment that Victoria Ashford had described, and the particular quality of her attention when she'd said the judgment part is not something you can train. He thought about the fact that she had listened to him for the full length of what he had to say before forming a conclusion, and that this had felt, in the context of that afternoon, almost extraordinarily unusual. He started the car. The drive home took 22 minutes through snow-slicked streets. Emma asleep in the back seat again by the time they crossed the river. The city sliding past in amber and white. He didn't turn on the radio. He drove carefully through the snow, watching the road, and let the quiet be quiet. The apartment was warm. He carried Emma inside without waking her, got her coat and boots off with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this many times, and tucked her in. He stood in the doorway of her room for a moment, looking at her, the rise and fall of her breathing steady and slow. The nightlight cast a soft amber circle on the far wall, a little owl that Claire had picked out before Emma was born, which still worked, which he replaced the bulb in every year or so, which Emma had never asked him to remove. He left the door open 2 inches, the way she liked it. Then he went to the kitchen and made soup the real kind, from scratch, something to do with his hands, and sat at the small table by the window while it cooked, watching the snow come down over Lincoln Square, thinking about Thursday. He went in on Thursday. The team lead conversation took 2.5 hours. Victoria walked him through the restructured scope of the role. Not the version that had been posted 6 months ago, but a revised version that had more autonomy and a different reporting structure, with direct access to the infrastructure committee rather than the filtered-through layer of middle management that had allowed that morning's process failures to happen undetected. She had clearly been thinking about the structural changes for longer than this incident. It was a document with revision dates going back 8 weeks, which meant the reorganization had been in motion before Daniel's termination, before Lucas, before all of it. His situation had perhaps accelerated the timeline, but the thinking was already there. She answered every question he asked directly. When he raised a concern about the culture of the infrastructure team and whether the events of Tuesday had fundamentally changed something about trust within it, she didn't deflect. "It changed some things and confirmed others," she said. "The ones it confirmed are mostly good. The ones it changed are mostly correctable, but not immediately." She looked at him. "I won't pretend the work is easy. I'm not looking for easy," he said. She held his gaze for a moment. "No," she said. "I didn't think so." He asked about the IT director. Victoria was measured in her answer. She said the conversation had happened, that there had been accountability without theater, and that certain processes had already been revised. She did not offer specifics, and he did not press for them. It was enough to know the conversation had occurred, that the carelessness that had enabled Tuesday afternoon's disaster had been named and examined rather than quietly archived. He asked, near the end, about Lucas Grant. Specifically, what happened to people who did what he had done. The legal team is handling it, Victoria said. The technical aspects of what he did, the unauthorized access, the deliberate sabotage of company infrastructure, those have consequences that exist independent of any decision I make. She paused. He'll have time to think about what he chose. Daniel nodded. He found, somewhat to his own surprise, that he had no particular appetite for Lucas Grant's reckoning, not because what Lucas had done was forgivable, but because his own energy was finite and there were better places to put it. Emma's school had a field trip coming up in March. He'd promised to chaperone. He'd been afraid, on Tuesday afternoon, that he would have to cancel. He wasn't going to have to cancel. That mattered more than the specific texture of Lucas Grant's consequences. Emma's drawing was already on Victoria's desk when he came in. Stephanie had placed it there in a simple clip frame, the kind you could buy for $3, orange cat and careful snowflakes and the timestamp 2:15 visible in the lower corner. Victoria had not mentioned it. Neither had Daniel. But when he was leaving coat on, portfolio under his arm, the door half open, he glanced back and saw her looking at it. Not strategically, not professionally, just looking, with the expression of someone sitting with something true. "Thank you," he said. She looked up. "For seeing it," he said. "All of it." Victoria Ashford, who had spent 4 years building something and protecting it, who had learned to read situations quickly and move through institutions with the efficiency of someone who understood that sentiment and rigor were not opposites but required each other to mean anything, looked at the man in the doorway of her office with the city spread out behind him and the snow on his coat shoulders. "You never needed someone to rescue you," she said. "You needed someone to stop moving fast enough to actually look." He nodded, once. Then he walked out through the frosted glass doors, down the corridor lined with the low winter light coming in off the lake, past the row of framed company milestones that he had walked past hundreds of times without looking at, and back into his life. Outside, Chicago was doing what it always did after a storm, resuming itself. The sidewalks were shoveled and sanded. The L trains ran their routes with their familiar metal percussion. The coffee shop on the corner had its lights on, and its door propped open despite the cold, and the smell of something warm drifted out into the morning air. He stopped at the corner and stood for a moment. Not because he needed to, but because the air was cold and clear, and he wanted to be in it. Around him, the city moved, people with their collars up and their heads down. A delivery driver, double-parked with hazards blinking, a woman in a red coat walking a dog who was very interested in a patch of ice near the hydrant. He watched all of it for a moment. Then he kept walking. Daniel Hayes walked through it, his hands in his pockets and Emma's drawing of an orange cat folded carefully in his coat, an extra copy he'd made the night before because she had wanted her father to have one too. The snow had stopped. The sky was a clean, particular blue that only happens in the Midwest in February. After everything has been stripped back and the air has been washed clear of everything provisional and soft, and what remains is only what is genuinely there. He walked through it, and it was enough.